Okay, we are live. This is Michelle McHugh. She is a digital teacher librarian at Three Creeks K-8, which is a brand new school in Arvada. I did all of my internship hours there for my field experience. And while I was at Three Creeks, I asked her many of the questions that I'll be asking over this video as well. So, Michelle, are you ready?
I am ready.
Perfect. Okay. So my first question is not loading. Let's see here. If I can, maybe I can pull it up on my phone. That might be easier. I might have too many windows open or something. Hold on one second. I will be cutting and chopping the video as well. So
kind of figured.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I can hear myself.
Oh, you can? All right. Are you ready for the first question?
Sure.
Okay. So what do you think Three Creeks does differently that sets you guys apart from other elementary schools?
I think the biggest thing, oh, Kelsey, I can hear you.
Oh, you do? Okay. Hold on a second. Let's see. Let me see here. Oh, okay. How about, okay, if I ask a question and then I turn off my camera, or if I turn off my microphone, after I ask the question, let me know if you can still hear yourself. So I'm about to turn the microphone off.
Okay. So I think the biggest difference that Three Creeks, okay, that works. Okay, I'll start over again. Okay, so I think So I think the biggest difference between Three Creeks and any of the other elementary schools that I've worked with or worked at is the difference in pedagogy. It's a mindset and a growth mindset, which is going to come naturally because it is a brand new building with brand new teammates and you're establishing all of those routines and procedures. So there isn't any standard, which is also really, really challenging because there's no status quo. So everything that we're doing together and we're creating that. But it's the administration and the leadership, it's the expectations that they have for all of us that really, truly has set Three Creeks apart. Just going in knowing that you're a part of a school where innovation isn't the vision, innovation is the expectation, is a very big pedagogy shift. Incorporating technology purposefully into instruction every single day and not just using it for substitution or as a word processor. We got to start out gradually, but now it's the expectation that we shouldn't see students on devices unless they're using them to enhance their learning. And I think another really huge shift is it is completely 100% student focused. It's not about assessment. It's not about grades or scores. It's all about building community and building relationships and really about what's best for kids and differentiating.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I actually have several follow-up questions relating to what you just said. And one of them is, when I was spending time with you at Three Creeks, one of the themes I noticed throughout the building that relates to what you were just talking about with pedagogy is that your entire staff is willing to fail forward. And I heard you guys talk about that a lot. And so I was wondering, how did you and your leadership team create that culture for people to feel comfortable to fail forward?
I think that because our administrator from the get-go has constantly reiterated that we're not going to learn everything in the first year, that this is constantly going to be a learning curve for all of us, that will continue to grow and expand. And not only has she shared that with us as staff members, but she's also shared that with our paraprofessionals. She shared that with our custodial staff. She's shared that with our families and the community and anybody that comes into the building. She and our assistant principal have created the environment where they want us to be failing forward. They want us to take the risks. They want to be invited in to see us taking those risks, because it really truly embodies growth mindset, which I know is a big buzzword right now and has been for the last few years. But if we're not modeling that for students every single day, how can we expect them to emulate that or to have a growth mindset? So having leadership that constantly reiterates that we're all in the same situation and we're all working towards a greater good, and that eventually someday we will get to a point where we will have status quo, where we will be able to say, we've had this experience and here's what we've learned from it. And one of the things that I love is they make mistakes too, and that they own it and they say, oh, that looked so good on paper, but that really stunk when we just tried to apply it. And it's a lot of reflection. We are constantly having these conversations about reflection. That's how Parent University came about, was because of our reflective conversations based on the TEL survey that went out in our family community school partnership meeting that we had with Dr. Glass. That's how that all got started, was because we were willing to say, hey, this is brand new. We'll look at the data and we'll come back and we'll discuss, and then we'll reflect and see what can we do differently next time, what worked really well that we can continue with, and where do we need to make some changes.
Perfect. Okay, so my next question is, when you are working with a teacher that is resistant to change or that is resistant to adopting those new pedagogies, what ways do you either like push or pull them to help them to innovate that mindset?
So that is a great question, because I think everyone thinks that naturally, if we are a one-to-one iPad school, we automatically only hired teachers that were one-to-one previously or had lots of experience, and that's not true at all. We have over half of our staff had never had a one-to-one environment. So I do still have challenges when I'm working with some of my teammates, in that they may not be ready to take on as much as what they'd like to, because they haven't created the systemic expectations in their classrooms where the students are able to handle it. So a lot of times what we end up talking about in our planning meetings is going to be, what do the kids already know? Like, what's their prior background knowledge? And that gets really tricky too, since we're all first year. We have kids from all over the United States and even outside of the United States, and we're continuing to get new students. So the teacher needs to first find out what the kids know, and then she has to share that with me. And then depending on where the kids are at and what other holes we can fill in to get them ready to even take on something new. Like, you got to be there and experience incorporating the Spiros into instruction in second grade. And second grade has had a lot of changes this year. We have a teacher that started in January in one of our second grade classrooms. So she's still building community and relationships. So knowing what she's comfortable with, but then knowing what the kids have already had as far as experience, I think that plays into it a lot. And I also always ask my teammates what they're comfortable with. And I always invite them to co-teach a lesson with me. And I always invite them to be a part of it. I always want them, even though I don't know that they would necessarily call it co-teaching, I'll lead a lesson, but I always defer to them and I'll ask them questions while I'm teaching. Or if they feel more comfortable, I'll take over the first lesson. But then usually after I've been in their classroom and they hear me and they see how I teach and how I let the kids struggle, they'll just jump on board and they'll be like, oh my gosh, that was great. Okay, yeah, I totally want to try that. And by the next day, when we're finishing up the lesson, it tends to dovetail really well that they can bring in their expertise and content, and then I can support them with any of the technical difficulties. And there's always going to be a technical difficulty, whether it's a kid who doesn't have a charged iPad or whether it's a kiddo whose iPad is just acting kind of on the fritz. I think them knowing that there's somebody there to help out and support if there are technical difficulties takes the pressure off. And then they also get a chance to see each other. Something that we do is we cover classes so that teachers can observe. I think that definitely creates a very collaborative environment where everyone's willing to share, that they know it's not judgmental, that it's all about how can I take this and apply it with my own students. So it's all about us moving forward. And there really isn't a fear about not moving forward since we're all moving forward together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know you were talking about, maybe it was you or Kimberly were talking about the pineapple chart, and I would love to know more about that. But I'm going to ask you my next question, just because I know that you don't have a ton of time. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, so being a new school, there's little public data for your student success. Like, I had a hard time finding your student data on, like greatschools.com or whatever. And so I want to know, like, how do you guys know that what you're doing is going to lead to student success? Like, what kind of data do you use currently? Like, what baseline do you have? Do you guys know where you want to go?
So MAP data has been what we've started using at the beginning of the year. MAP data is our most solid form of data that we have to link to each one of our students. Because like you said, we've got kiddos from all over the country, even outside of the country coming, and we still have new kiddos joining us. We've got kids coming on we get out May 24th and we've got kiddos signing up on May 14th. So obviously in that case, we won't have data, but what we are doing is we're using that MAP data and pulling those conversations into our PLCs. And in PLCs, that's where teachers are able to sit down and kind of look at the general kind of like those general guidelines. And I'm sorry, the RIT scores. I know the RIT scores have been huge. And that's been what the focus has been on. And then also comparing our data to the schools around us. That's been the other piece that we're trying to do as far as using standardized testing. But our teachers are also, this is something that's new that I never had in other schools before. Our teachers have to send out progress reports, and I believe it's like 6 weeks. At the 6-week mark, all teachers have to send home progress reports to communicate to parents exactly how their child is doing, because that's been something that our community has said that they really, really want. And something that we're noticing, parents feel a little bit more detached because we are a digital school, and a lot of families are just learning how to navigate that. So by having these interim progress monitoring pieces that go home that have assessment data, and teachers' gradebooks are also, they have to bring their gradebooks to PLCs, and they do go over those with their evaluator, because again, since we are so new and we are creating what is our, I guess, like our pedagogy around grading and grade books, and that too, we're trying to be flexible with our mindset on that, and how can we adjust it, what's working, what isn't. But progress reports, open grade books with evaluators. And it's not that the evaluators are evaluating the grades, it's that they want to make sure that we're keeping great data so that we do have a body of evidence when we are talking to families. And fortunately, some of the students were already here in Jeffco, so we do have past data, and some of the students' records did come over in paper form, so we are able to patchwork some of those pieces together. But it's going to be all based on this year, like that's moving forward. I don't know that there's any other way to say it other than this is going to be our baseline.
Yeah, that's great. Do you think that being new relieves pressure or adds pressure to teachers to perform well on the upcoming PARCC tests, like with that data?
I think that it causes a lot more anxiety, because I think not only are every single one of my teammates, and I have teammates that have, less than 5 years of experience to teachers that have been teaching for almost 20 years or more. And all of them say that this is by far their hardest year they've ever had. And they feel like they're brand new this year. Like I feel like the teachers have a lot of anxiety, but not pressure. There is not that pressure coming from our administration that students must do well on standardized testing. It's all about building community, building those relationships and creating environments where students will thrive. And it's been much more around students and mentally and physically making sure that they're comfortable taking these tests than it has been about how they perform, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I keep forgetting that I mute my microphone when you're talking, so you probably can't hear when I say things like, yes, absolutely. Well, then you keep touching on things that I'm about to ask. So I remember at the Jeffco Get Your Tech On event that your leadership team had discussed the fact that starting a new school is much more challenging than anybody would ever believe. And I think a lot of people think that it's this amazing place. Everybody who comes to work there has the same vision. Everybody, that's kind of a misconception that I think a lot of people have. And so I was wondering what other misconceptions do people have about starting a new school, or what challenges has that actually presented?
I think one of the biggest challenges that we were not expecting was with purchasing, with the bureaucracy that you have to go through. And it's very, very challenging when none of us as the core team members, that we were all teachers. I was the DTL, and then there was upper elementary, mid elementary, and then like K2, like primary. And none of us had release time. So our meetings had to be after school from like 3:30 to 7:30, and on the weekends, and Google Hangouts, and a lot of our own time. And it really stunk because none of those times are when the rest of the district is available. So that was a massive challenge. And I would highly advise that no one do that again, and that the core team be relieved for the remainder of the time, or that they are hired specifically to build. And I know that people would wonder what you would be doing that whole time, but I can tell you, just going through requisitions is so challenging and so time consuming. All of the little things that need to be done before you can even make a purchase, getting things on spreadsheets, making sure that the right thing is listed, making sure that it's from the right vendors. All of those pieces are so challenging. And also furniture, because we went with our district approved vendor. And I don't know if it's the students, I don't know if it's the furniture, but we've been having a lot of issues with the furniture that we purchased, not withstanding student use, like not holding up. And I'm not sure if that's product or if it's the process of how it's being used, but that's really challenging because we spent so much time being thoughtful about flexible seating and offering flexible seating in the classroom, and even getting down to like the sizes and making sure that the right sizes are in the right classrooms, and that furniture can also be moved up a grade level or down a grade level if it needs to, which we did have to do this year. All of these little tedious pieces that go together. And then things like the handbook. We didn't have a handbook. We had to go through and we had to rewrite that. And a lot of that is going to be a philosophical debate. And again, I love that our administration said to the staff, this is what our core team members came up with, but please know that this was our baseline and we can always make adjustments, especially since we're growing into a middle school now with 7th grade starting next year and 8th grade the year after. That's going to change the dynamics of how the handbook is even created. Like, we're going to need to start adding specifics for middle school because not all kids are the same. Like, all of the different lenses, I think it's really important to have a good variety, like you said, of staff, so that we can each bring a different lens to the conversation to make us more reflective on our decisions. Because if we hadn't had a middle school representative there, things would have been completely different for how 6th grade is moving forward and how they'll turn into 7th grade next year. I mean, just having somebody that teaches kindergarten who can give that primary view completely changes the idea, remembering that we have half-day kindergarten when we're scheduling assemblies. I mean, those little things that you don't even think of. Calendar, holy cow. And then our biggest challenge this year that we hadn't planned for, that we didn't have something literally like a folder ready for, is the amount of new students that we have picked up. So we've had to create a whole entire process of how to introduce new families into the community to our school, and giving tours. We give tours on a daily basis, before school, during school, and after school. That wasn't something that we had planned out because it's unprecedented. There's never been an influx of students like this. So all of those little pieces that you just show up and this is the time lunches, and this is where these classrooms are because they've always been there, and this is how furniture is used. And if you run out of batteries, this is who you ask. All of those pieces weren't in place. And until we actually started functioning as a school, you don't know what you don't know.
It is so funny how every single question that I ask, the way that you answer it literally leads me to my next question. That's so funny. So this one's the last one. And I was wondering, how do you guys plan to sustain your school's vision and success with adding a 7th and 8th grade in the coming years?
So we're planning right now. We've been planning since school started. I'm on the middle school leadership team as well. And the challenge with us evolving into middle school is our numbers, because right now we still, even though 6th grade is moving up, so we'll have 6, 7, we're still really low on numbers. So we're not even going to be able to run a true middle school next year because of our enrollment. There's just not funding. And with site-based or school-based budgeting, the funding's not there to be able to offer all of the electives that we eventually want to offer. So that in itself has been challenging, because we're going to still continue to build our middle school model over the course of, I'd say, the next 4 years, because I think it's going to take us at least a solid 3 to 4 more years before we kind of hit that flow where the population has kind of stabilized. The neighborhoods will both be built out, so there won't be that constant influx of new homes closing, because that's been a really big challenge. And until the kids until they actually have the contract that they're moving and closing on a house, we can't take them as students. So that's been really challenging in and of itself. So once that kind of patterns out, our vision of sustaining the one-to-one iPads, that is one of my leader's greatest strengths. And she and I are on the same page about a sustainability plan. And what we're looking at doing is kind of a hybrid of what was being done with the One to World Chromebook initiative being carried out at several of the high schools, where each year the families pay a fee. Now, they wouldn't own the device, but they also would not have to pay for damages to the device because their fee would cover everything. So say a $50 fee from each student, that would then allow us to have funds to pay for any damages that incur throughout the year. We're also rethinking students taking devices home in the lower grade levels, but for maybe middle school, they will be taking the devices home because they will need them at home in order to access the apps. So we're even thinking about changing that model instead of having all students bring devices home every single day. Because the feedback that we just received from our parent survey for Parent University indicated that parents don't feel like their students need to be taking them home. So it's still our vision of one-to-one, but again, we're going back and we're modifying that. And I love that Laura has done and held a lot of community meetings even before the school was built. And we're continuing to develop and build our vision with the input from our families, from our students, from the staff. Like, we're very holistic and organic that way. And I love that it's always open doors. So we can go to our administration and say, like, I went in and I said, I think we really need to rethink devices going home because of what I'm seeing and how hard it is and what I'm hearing. And my administration is open to that. It doesn't mean that they're going to always agree with me, but I like that they'll tell me their whys and that I can also share with them. Here's what I'm noticing. So I think we're noticing. Say that again. Oh, me? So I think that us sustaining our vision and mission at Three Creeks is also with our staff, even though it's hard and even though we're all learning, they want to continue to grow and learn as educators. In fact, if you ask any of them, they're willing to take training. They're willing to try something new. Some of the teachers that have been teaching for 18 years, that's why they came, is they are ready to go to the next level and they're ready to teach these kids in a way that hasn't been done before. And I love that they're not scared of the challenge, that they embrace it. And I think it is a lot easier said than done. And I think we're living that right now. But I just feel like the experience and the willingness to attempt to even make the attempts and take the risk has so far outweighed not, that they're really now beginning to pick up momentum. And the one thing I will say that we hear and that we really need to rethink is our professional development. So that's going to be a big focus for us, is professional development and keeping everyone on the same page and not allowing middle school, just because they're upstairs, to separate and say, oh, well, this isn't a middle school meeting, so we're not coming. Laura won't have that. She will not let that go. And I love that she won't let that happen. So I think it's all based on our administration. And I will absolutely die if she is not my principal.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Michelle. I really, really appreciate it. I'm going to end the live broadcast real quick. 1 second.